I am now recording, and I will post this. I'll find it. I'll probably put it in a box folder, and I'll send you a link to it if you'd like to get back to today's discussion. Okay, Akash, hello.
Hello, Professor Bigelow.
Okay, so have you seen my? Did my email arrive? Akash, take a look at your email if you can do so without a lot of hassle. You should have a message from me just in the last couple of minutes.
Yeah, I see it.
Okay, good. So here's the plan. Just so we make sure, I'll make sure that like you're all able to overcome my inherent, chaos in attempting to like figure out schedules and dates, which is always a challenge for me under the best of circumstances. So our plan is this: the next time I see you on Tuesday in class, there's no reading assignment. My assumption is you're doing research at that point. You're reading articles, you're choosing your article for the final paper, you are writing your one-page article assessment. Those article assessments are due by noon on Tuesday the 28th. So between noon and 2, I can prepare by looking them over, thinking about some questions to ask, and some advice, general advice. And then when I see you all at 2, I'm just going to ask you all some questions about the articles that you've read, what you learned, what article you chose, why you think it's interesting, and we'll have some discussion about, I think it will be interesting for you all to like hear from each other what sort of articles you've chosen, what sort of papers you're imagining, and do just bear in mind the advice I was giving you that you last time on Tuesday about really conceiving of this, especially like this is the longest piece of the written assignment of the semester, obviously. So really think of yourselves as essayists, and try to sort of take yourself seriously as writers here. There's no technical like format that you need to conform to for this essay. When I say write an essay of 8 to 10 pages that does these things, I really mean that. I want you to think of yourselves as expressing and exploring your own ideas and reactions, both to the novel and to the article in this thing. I have no preconceived form or format. I have in terms of style or rhetorical posture, all those choices are up to you. So I'm hoping that we can maybe talk about that a little bit too. I mean, if you have ideas about, even very preliminary ideas on Tuesday, about how you're going to frame your discussion of your article, how like maybe you'll use the article as a kind of springboard to your own discussion, how you're going to bore into the article if you want to, argue with it or debate some parts of it. But, however, I guess wherever you are in the process of working on your final paper, we'll just check in and do a little bit of sharing on Tuesday. Also on Tuesday, I'm just going to have some concluding questions for you. Just be interested in some discussion about the whole semester. I always like to have a day at the end where we just have time to kind of think about the course as a whole. So we'll do that Tuesday. Thursday will be open consultation hours. It will just be kind of an open writing workshop. I will be available on Zoom. Whoever comes on Zoom at a given time, we'll just have a discussion. We'll check in with each other. If it's 5 people, we'll talk as 5 people. If it seems like we need some one-on-one time, we can break off, or I can break you off, and it'll just be very flexible. So encourage you. It's optional. I'll regard it as optional, so you don't have to tune into class. You don't have to, if you want to tune into class, you don't have to tune in for the whole hour and a half or hour and 15. But I'll be available on Zoom for whatever you'd like. And I've got regular office hours after class on Thursday, as I do today, 3:30 to 4:30. So I'll also be in my regular office hours, which you can use, for one-on-one consultations. So that's Thursday. Then Friday the 1st by noon, so a week from tomorrow, your quote sheet is due. So that second ungraded process piece, where you're going to by then you will have chosen the major quotations that you think you're going to use in the paper, type them up, quick comment on each one. That goes to me by Friday at noon. So then you're off on the weekend with all the raw material of your paper kind of nailed down, or at least preliminarily so, and then you can begin to draft. And then the final paper is due the Wednesday of finals week, the 6th, by midnight. Okay, so are we clear? Any conflicts that anybody sees or any questions? Okay, very good.
For the article assessment.
Sure, yeah, Mary Elizabeth, go ahead.
Sorry, yeah.
That's all right.
For
No,
the article assessment, do we just we have our chosen article that we want to do and we just talk about why we want to use that one? Or do we have options and we talk about those?
Well, look at, I have to go back to, I don't want to look back at the assignment that I wrote up. Because I had a little description for what I wanted for the article assessment. So if that doesn't clarify, if there's some specific question, you can email me. But in general, all I want, sorry, my huge hands are shooting out. It's like you're watching Avatar with those 3D glasses, and it's very upsetting. All I really want from that article assessment is for you to write. It's ungraded, so I want you to use this blank page in any way that's going to be most useful for you, okay? Your job in this essay is to, the essay that you're going to write, your job is to talk about this article and respond to it and react to it, to enter into some kind of dialogue with it. Beyond that, I have no, there's no preconception. You can engage with it in whatever way you want. That one page is just a space for you to begin to explore what kind of engagement, what kind of dialogue you want to establish with your article. Now, to do that, I would say, bottom line for me is I do want you to just quickly explain the argument. I mean, I want you to, part of the opportunity here is for you to practice, putting into a few nice, economical, tightly conceived sentences the main argument that this article proposes and how it defends that argument. So, tell me what the article is proposing and how it supports that proposition about Middlemarch, and then what are you going to do with it? Or what do you think you're going to do with it? Shalise, more on that, or something else?
Yeah, I was wondering if we're going to get any comments of feedback, or if it's just for you to know. Okay.
Yeah, my hope is that, my hope is that by the time class starts on Tuesday, I will already have quickly read through everybody's one page and given you some comments on turn it in. By the way, just because I'm going to be doing this, if you don't feel like saying anything in answer to this question, that's fine. I understand. But what do you think? What do you think of me recording my paper comment, using the voice recording thing, and then just talking to you for 2.5 minutes about how your paper was? Has that been okay? Useful? Is that helpful?
I like it. It's kind of fascinating because I always read the end notes on my papers, and I'm like, oh, they're I don't know. But when you record your voice, it's oh, he is speaking to me, not just writing on my paper. And that's not a bad thing. It's just so different. It was kind of strange at first, but
it feels like cheating to me. I mean, it's sort of bizarrely intimate. I'm reaching right out to you across and listen to the sound of my voice. It's so, but I like it. I'm enjoying it. And I feel like I don't know. I feel like I'm able to think at a little bit more depth and detail, and also, well, I don't know. So good. I'll ask you this again on Tuesday as we're wrapping up. But I've been sort of enjoying that. So hopefully, I will have some written and a little quick voice comment for you on each of those things by the time we have class Tuesday, and then Friday, the ones I get Friday, I'll do my best to take a look at those Friday afternoon, Saturday morning, so that you have them pretty quick. I won't promise, just because with being sick, my energy level is I just find I get tired out and I have to rest from being sick. So I'm still behind on grading papers for my other class. So that's my plan, and I will do my best with that. What else, Shalise?
Sorry. Is it possible to get brief comments on our final paper since it will be online?
Oh, yeah. It will be, and you can think about this too, and then you can, if you have some preferences, you can send them to me. Yeah, thanks for asking that. What I normally do when I read final papers like that come in during finals week is that I don't write any margin, I don't write any internal comments on the paper at all. And I only write a quick, like, 1-sentence comment at the end of the paper, just like a quick summary assessment. And that's because so few people come back to get the final paper, which is fine, I understand. And I'm in a hurry, I've got a whole bunch of things to do. What I thought I would do was something similar to that, using Turnitin is, Turnitin, like I can click one button on Turnitin and then I can type a comment to you in the middle of a paragraph. But I can also use this handy list of, like, pre-written scripted comments. So, like, I can just say, like, good, excellent, awkward, whatever. So I may just put in a couple, like, quick, little one-word balloons as I'm reading, and then record a minute or two of final comment. So that was my plan, and you're welcome to pick those up, of course. And then if you want to get in touch with me, then we can talk more if you'd like some more in-depth feedback. What else is on your mind, Emma?
Oh, I got a lot of things on my mind. That's probably a bad question. I was just wondering if, towards the end of this, like after the semester's over and then over the summer, if you will be contactable.
Yes, I will. I mean, my incredibly impressive and detailed summer plans are keep getting up every day and keep sitting at this desk in front of that bookcase, and right adjacent to this computer into which I am now speaking. So I am here and would love to be in touch with you. Some of you, a couple are graduating, but most of you are going on, and many of you I've had some discussions with about your work as English majors and where you're coming from and where you're going, and would love to be in touch. What else? Okay, so now I can offer my official congratulations. I was sort of anticipating it, and I told you that story about what a big deal this is. But if you have finished Middlemarch, that is a big deal, and that is an enormous accomplishment. And not only can I say it's a huge accomplishment, I mean, you can tell how moved and pleased I was, because I was thinking about our Tuesday class later and sent you that email. I mean, I just the depth of your engagement with this book and your thoughtful responses have been really wonderful. So excellent job, congratulations. So here's my starting off question. So last time I asked you, what was your own reaction to the Feuerbach thesis that you see, that we've noticed Eliot working out in the book? So we read the Feuerbach theory a little bit, and then we've in many times found examples of Eliot applying that, using that idea of how we're all trapped within our own self-centered, egoistic desires, and that colors or shades or distorts our perception of the world around us, and it distorts other people. And so I asked you what you thought, and in general, people said lots of really smart things and had lots of great examples, but in general, you were a little bit critical of it. There was for all its. I mean, I guess I would say that your sense was that for all its strengths as a description of the traps that people can fall into, the traps of egoistic, self-centered perception or motivated reasoning, to use a more contemporary phrase, there is also something that's missing from that Feuerbach way of looking at human beings and society. And people phrased it in different ways. Like some people were saying, well, there is also a social element to human life. That human life, like Feuerbach and maybe Eliot here, make human beings look too radically individualistic, too radically cut off from each other. There is really more potential for, and maybe just built-in, connection between human individuals and amongst human beings in a society. There is such a thing as society, and so to focus so much on the way that individuals are just sunk down into this isolating well of their own perceptions is a little too extreme. Oh, Hillary. Hello. So good to see you.
Hi. Hi. Yeah, sorry, the power's out at my house,
Oh,
so
bummer.
I'm just on my
Oh, so
friend's
sorry.
hotspot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on.
Great to see you. So let's see. Oh yeah. So another person on Tuesday said, like you phrased it, you said, it just, like the Feuerbach scene. People said like it seems too extreme. It seems too absolute. It's too cut and dry. And what I'm wondering for today is whether you feel like Book 8 corrects a little bit for the extreme or absolute quality of that Feuerbachian vision of egoistic isolation that we've seen so much of. Do you feel like there is more of a focus on connection between people, on the things that bind people together in a society, as opposed to the things that just like lock them into their own head? Make sense? Did things change a little bit in the resolution of this book? And actually, why don't I give you a minute? Like I see a couple hands, but maybe think if you can think of a passage, maybe that would be like, and everybody can be a little bit prepared to offer some idea. Hillary, does that make sense a little? You were not part of the discussion on Tuesday, so you're at a little bit of a disadvantage.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
This is random, but I was doing some Control F on a copy of Middlemarch last night because I was bored. And the word light shows up almost 500 times. The word, what is the other word? Shoot, I looked up a bunch of them. The word interest comes up almost 200 times. And then the word I comes up 355 times.
I is in this, or I is in me?
The eyeball.
Ah, interesting. Yeah. That is, while you're flipping through the text, that is a great research tool, because you can find online texts of almost every significant work of literature these days. Well, I shouldn't put it that way. Every canonical work of literature, you can find an online text, and then you can do a word search, and you really can learn a lot. Okay, well let's jump into some discussion. I saw Sydney's hand, and then Emma, and then Shali's, and then we can keep going from there. Sydney, what were you thinking?
Now I'm trying to find it. But I was thinking when Dorothea has her kind of emotional break after she thinks that Rosamund and Will are together or having an affair or something, and the only thing that gets her up the next morning is thinking about how she can still do good for those set of three people whose lives are so interconnected. Like if she had only focused on herself, she would have succumbed to this misery, but the thought that she can still go out and like make a change in the world was what made her own personal misery like bearable.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's a huge chapter. That's a great example. I'll tell you what, let's just get a bunch of suggested passages and I'll just note them down. Then we can hear from more people. And then before we actually start diving in and reading passages. So that's chapter what? Chapter 80. Yeah, something like page 788.
Yeah.
Emma, what were you thinking?
Okay, sorry for the kennel in the background. We have someone coming over to inspect our house. So I was thinking of the first paragraph of the finale where she says promises may not be kept and an ardent onset may be followed by a declension. Because like the whole book 8 is very much about interpersonal connections and the way people see each other, but in the more romantic sense, which is very different from the rest of the book. And then like she has this, that's the first thing you read after like Mary and Fred get together, and you almost think that things aren't going to work out because people don't see each other correctly, but then everything ends up working out anyway. So I feel like that goes against Feuerbach.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And we ended up last time, we ended up talking kind of about the romantic comedy, whether like this is a tragedy of the failure of mutual recognition, or whether it isn't in fact a comedy and these, as like the great Shakespeare line has it, the course of true love never doth run smooth. In where is that in? Midsummer Night's Dream. Midsummer Night's Dream. So like paradigmatic romantic comedy. And the comic plot is the plot of comic misrecognition between the lovers, amongst the lovers, and then things work out. Okay, let's see. Shalise, what was your thought? And then Eliza.
I was also going to speak about Dorothea and how she's very inclined to help Woodgate, because I think like the last few books we've read, or like books in here, I like forgot Dorothea was even really a character, and then like all of a sudden she kind of pops back up and she's ready to save the day. And like on 761 it says nothing matters more to her than to show her human fellowship, to like be a helpful person and a good person. And then on the next page it really shows that like she's the only one who believes in Lydgate's innocence, and that means so much to him that like he gets up and forgets where he even is. So that really, like, she really, I think you could argue, saves him. And I mean, like, all the stress and like pain gets to him eventually as he dies pretty young, but I think she still made a huge difference in his life.
Yeah, absolutely. That's another huge turning point in a relationship. Eliza.
Yeah, the resolution of the Fred Vincy, Mary Garth plot was, I mean, like I knew it was going to happen. I just didn't know how. And I don't know. It's funny to me. Like I wasn't more so surprised. I wasn't really surprised by the connection between Mary and Fred, because that's evident. The only reason that Mary wasn't going to marry him is because he was financially reckless. But now it's like, oh, you magically have a house to live in, so everything's fine. But her parents being okay with it was what shocked me. The dad was just kind of like, yeah, you're in love, he's got a house, all is well. It, like, I don't know, I expected the mom to put up more of a fight, but because he has money doesn't mean that he's not gonna all of a sudden be financially intelligent. But yeah, I think that was that was such a huge turn from get out of our family, you cannot marry my daughter, to yeah, we're all good. So
Thought about that, Emma?
Yeah, I was just, because you're right, it makes no sense. But if you think about it, like Caleb Garth, or Mrs. Garth knew that Caleb was very set on Fred, and she said when he gets like that, she can't do anything but say yes to him because he won't change his mind. So I guess he just must have realized that Fred turned out to be the good guy.
Sydney.
And Fred had been proving himself for a few months up to that point. I think our sense of time, Middlemarch, gets a little warped because sometimes he moves very slowly, sometimes he moves very quickly, but he has been working under Caleb for a while and has been doing very well and been more responsible with his finances. So
He authors a book on animal husbandry, things to have worked out. Very good, very good. Let's see. Mary Elizabeth, do you have any thought about this? Like you had a real firm sense of like, there's something missing from this portrait of life. And I wonder if, one way of putting what I'm getting so far from people is that, yes, you see more connection between people, but it maybe feels a little bit artificial or a little bit forced. Especially like you could argue that with the Fred and Mary plot.
Right. I definitely did think it was a little forced, especially like at the end. And they were like, oh, everyone, and like Fred and Mary were like actually a really great couple. And like Rosamond, I mean, she still ended up being the worst in remarrying.
An old man.
Yeah, I feel like this happens in all of the novels that we
Rosamond with
read.
Oscar the Grouch.
Yeah. But like in all the novels we read, it always ends up like having this perfect ending. And I feel like I've just been trained to be so critical of that, especially in the end where like I feel like there's a lot of commentary on gender and how that is still overlooked. Like with Mary's writing the book and they're like, oh, well, all the credit went to Fred. Like they're still not completely matching up. But I mean, I think there was definitely some improvement, like with Dorothea finally like marrying Will, and like even Mrs. Bulstrode like staying with Mr. Bulstrode, just like showing loyalty. So I think there was some good here.
Great. I want to make sure that we consider that, the question of the book's feminism, if that's the right term, or whatever that would mean specifically in relation to the Victorian period. But we started this book with that really powerful image in the prologue of this as an image of female genius, of Dorothea, who's somebody who has just unlimited intelligence, unlimited spiritual depth of feeling, somebody whose talent is really limitless, but born into a society that's never going to see that talent, that's never going to perceive that ability because she's a woman. And she lacks I think this is like Eliot's little twist of the knife into the Victorian industrial world, which is always, considered as itself so modern and so up to date and so high tech with all of its factories and its telegraphs. So like we have the electric telegraph by the time that Eliot is writing. We have railroads, and we have newspapers that are going back and forth by railroads, and we have very rapid communication. And she's like, well, yeah, but you know what? You know what you don't have? You don't have a spiritual institution that offers any latitude for female agency or power, right? And those Catholics that you look down your nose at, they had that, right? Saint Teresa had a sphere of influence in the Catholic Church where she could exercise this genius of hers. And in this supposedly modern, up-to-date, much more liberated and free-thinking society, British women do not. So like a really powerful insistence on a kind of vision of the gender inequities of this world as the premise for this story. So I think the whatever it's called, the post-face, what is it called? The finale. The finale is quite deliberate at picking up those preface themes and that Saint Teresa theme, and then carrying it through. So like all that, we should really think about those questions too, as we're talking about the conclusion, particularly given the argument that this sort of emerged from the first few comments about how maybe it's a little like the book is offering us offering us solutions that are a little too easy, like everybody married and they lived happily ever after, whatever. Eliza.
Yeah, I was just thinking about when you started talking about the institutions and like how England lacked that for women in this period. I totally agree with that, and I think she is critiquing that. I think it's fascinating though that she doesn't really include anywhere, at least that I remember, a discussion of I can't remember what they're called, but female clubs who led human rights movements. Basically, they were in large part responsible for the abolition of slavery in Britain in the 19th century. And they they were the first group who founded the British Humane Society or something like that. Female suffragettes, the reason that they really were able to exist is because they were built on the backs of this widespread phenomenon of women caring for vulnerable populations. And it was looked down upon by men kind of, because it was oh, of course you care about slave mothers and the mother's children because that's a family concern and therefore a woman's concern. But it got to the point where politicians were actually looking for the support of these groups because they could sway voters. So I agree, it's not like they have nuns. The possibility for a Saint Teresa was non-existent in England, but I don't know. I think it's really odd that she doesn't include anything like that to not only critique the society, but to say like, hey, here's something that we've done right. We need to do more of this. So I don't know. I think that's really fascinating.
It's a great point. Emma's got her hand up.
Yeah, so I definitely agree with that, but I think there's a part of her that knows that no matter if she tried to push for like this full out feminism that we have now, it would have just been rejected and no one would have liked her book, which I think is why like all of the relationships, especially Lydgate and Rosie, are all like, they say they're fettered. She calls marriage a yoke and the women are masters. Like you can see with Bulstrode too, Harriet at the end of the day has this say. So even though like these women don't have a public influence, they influence the men who then influence the public. So yeah, we can't have that, but it's still the women who are in control.
I'm just casting my mind. I mean, I think that's a good response. So maybe you could say that he built into Middlemarch is a sense. Well, I think this is right. Like, okay, so remember how when Dorothea goes to Lydgate, like that's the first time he tells his whole story to anybody, right? He's just been carrying this around, feeling like an idiot, feeling like he's like destroyed his marriage. He made a stupid mistake, a series of stupid mistakes. He's ruined everything, and he won't even like stand up for himself. And it's only we could find the passage, or maybe somebody has it, but it's really because Dorothea is a woman that he will speak to her, right? I mean, it makes clear that if it was another guy, in fact, like Fairbrother tries to talk to him, and Fairbrother then warns Dorothea, no, like he's not going to listen to you. But Eliot the narrator talks about like this kind of this superior female. I don't know if she uses the word capacity, but like the superior nature of empathy, or like the world of women, the sphere of the feminine. You know, as we've talked about it in the past at the beginning of the semester, the sphere of the feminine for dominant Victorian culture was the sphere of emotions and sympathy, the sphere of the family and the cultivation of emotional relationships. And so, I mean, in a way she's saying, yeah, that's the conventional world that we live in, but she's in a way also like, I don't know, but sympathy is at the core of the entire world. I mean, sympathy is what all experience is about. And so the fact that women in this world are like privileged givers and sensitized agents of sympathy, agents of like perception of the accurate perception of other people, that actually gives them a kind of moral agency, which I think connects to what you were talking about, Eliza. So that, I mean, that's one thing that comes to mind. Oh, but I'm casting my mind like across all of Eliot's novels, and there aren't any novels about like suffragettes or these sort of activist circles of women that you're describing, abolitionists. There's a really fascinating novel that's about, she's not the protagonist, but she's a major character, about a Methodist minister who's a woman. And, you know, she's sort of looked askance at by, you know, Church of England, like upper middle class establishment types, as like, oh, like lady preacher, that's sort of like weird and low class. Yeah.
Eliza and I had this conversation at the beginning of the year because like I go to a Methodist church and I've been to a couple, and all the ones in like where I am all have female pastors. And some people think it's very odd, but there's something nice about it because they can relate to you on a lot more sympathetic level, which I think is what we're talking about.
Yeah. So this may just be my own bias as a reader and a student of Eliot's work, but I think of her as so much more of like an academic, an intellectual. She's a philosopher and a theologian, and that's where her sphere of interest and influence is. And so she's just not naturally thinking of those other spheres of action that you're mentioning. Anyway, that's all great. Good. I've got a bunch of points that we will be sure to come back to. Let me just jump around a little bit more. Caroline, Any thoughts about the big question here?
Yeah, I mean, I like what people have said at the beginning, especially about Dorothea and the passages they picked out. One place, though, that I thought about Feuerbach, I wasn't really sure. I don't know if I came to a conclusion about it, but it was on 750 and 751 when the Bulstrodes, when Bulstrode's wife goes to him and they decide that they're going to stay together. And I guess I just was thinking about Feuerbach when I was reading it, because I was feeling like they had reached this place. As I was reading it, I was just like, have they reached a place of perfect understanding? And then they say, open-minded as she was, she nevertheless shrank from the words which would have expressed their mutual consciousness, as she would have shrunk from flakes of fire. And obviously the fire thing reminded me of the metaphor we've been talking about.
Oh, wonderful. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's where I was thinking of Feuerbach towards the beginning of the reading.
Yeah, that's a great example. And, that's where arguably they kind of see each other for what they see the reality as it's happening. But they also are like, we're not going to go there. Like, we're not going to, she says, she's not going to ask, did you do anything wrong? And he cannot tell her he's innocent because he isn't. Yeah.
And I felt like they reached a place where they both knew that. They both knew that they weren't going to have the conversation and that they were just going to keep living their life together.
Yeah.
And I felt like in a way that was against Feuerbach, because they had reached that place where they knew what the other one was thinking.
So there is at least a kind of mutual recognition.
Yeah.
Shalise?
Yeah, so if women were the agents of empathy or whatnot, then was it just him with Rosamund, they were just too deep in a relationship? Why couldn't he have the same conversation with her as he did with Dorothea?
Good question. What about
Dorothea?
Is Rosamund an agency of empathy?
No, she's an agency of
She's horrid.
They would just fight.
She's a vase of egotism.
You have a whole conversation with somebody who is only ever focused on the way the situation affects them and their perception.
Yep.
That's not conducive to an actual conversation, because they're never going to try and see it from Lydgate's point of view. So what's the point there?
It's honestly the perfect thing that her world shattered, because she probably would have never been able to live with Lydgate.
Yeah, that's an important key word in that scene. Okay, so this is great. Mary Elizabeth.
I've just been trying to make her kind of a Lady Susan figure in my head. Is she just kind of acting like a man here, and we think she's terrible because she's supposed to be so empathetic? I don't know. She's still the worst, but I don't know.
That's exactly the way to think. I really, really like that. Now whether you go in that direction, I think that's the kind of thing that would be a really interesting thesis to try to explore. Is there a way that we could kind of recuperate this character who's obviously been the kind of the butt of the joke in the novel, or the object of tragedy, or the creator of and Sydney summed it up well. She's in a way the ultimate example of this Feuerbachian problem of she is constitutionally incapable of thinking from other people's points of view. In the words of the novel at the beginning, she has it has never dawned on her that other people exist within their own center of self, right? We don't like those people. They are not fun to be around. But it had to be, well, let me make the, didn't it have to be that bad? Didn't we have to hate her that much in order for it, okay, I won't put it that way. I'll put it the other way. Didn't she have to be so extreme in her self-centeredness in order for it to be such a monumental achievement that then Dorothea breaks through? Eliza. Can't hear you.
I'm muted, sorry. Okay, I really like the Lady Susan point, and I think especially the fact that she marries an older physician after Lydgate dies is very telling, because the first round it's oh, Lydgate's cute, and Lady Susan really likes her cute guys, but then I think Rosie learns from her mistakes that, oh, he was cute, but he had no money. So then the second time around, she's like, okay, I know what I'm doing now. Get the money. That's all we care about. So I think you can see her actually kind of developing into Lady Susan as the novel progresses, if you want to read it that way.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I think that's excellent. Okay, I'm making a note. Oh, wait. Okay, good. Akash, do you want to jump in with anything? Feel like there's kind of any sort of possible resolution here?
Well, it was just really interesting to me that like Dorothea, she seemed to be really independent throughout the book. Like at the end, was like okay with taking a back seat with everything and letting like her husband do the job, like be a philanthropist, like work for the world, and like she was okay with letting him do that, but not doing that herself. It was just interesting that she like pushed her, like that she like let herself stay in the realm of the home. And I was just interested by that.
Yeah, that is fascinating. And yeah, we'll definitely come back to this. Like, yes, many questions to ask you about this. Let's see. Lindley, any thoughts?
Yeah, Dorothea kind of taking the back seat there at the end is also stood out to me as well. I just was not expecting that. I mean, I guess I should have been because she's selfless throughout the novel. But I don't know, I just wasn't quite satisfied with that ending.
Yeah, no, it's an excellent point and an excellent question, because it's almost like she doesn't learn from the Casaubon incident, right? Or like you could, I mean, from this point of view, you could say, well, like she expects to be a kind of equal partner in the marriage with Casaubon, and then it ends up entering into a marriage where it doesn't really feel like that, at least from this point of view. That's excellent. Hillary, if you want to pass, that's fine since you weren't here Tuesday, but any thoughts about, how we get resolution at the end in the last book?
Yeah, I might pass. I don't have anything particular.
Yeah, that's fine. And Abigail, what about you?
Yeah, I was kind of like Lindley and Akash. Like, I wasn't satisfied with her taking the back seat, and like also just in relation to like the beginning where she's like, I want an epic life, or like kind of like on that vibe, like how she doesn't get that. But at the last line talks about like how unhistoric acts like kind of become like almost in themselves like an epic life for her, like that kind of stuff. Like it's kind of like this like weird contradiction between like the beginning and then this like ending.
Yeah.
I think I'm scrambling at this point.
This is great. Why don't we turn to the end? I mean, that last paragraph is pretty remarkable and it deserves some attention. And I want to bring it back to, well, it connects a lot of things. I mean, it connects back to Mary Elizabeth's question. Wait, which question? To Akash and Lindley's ideas. Emma, did you have a thought on that also before we read?
Oh yeah, like about the contradiction between what she wanted at the beginning and then what she ends up with at the end. Like I do think her and Will are very equal partners, and even though she doesn't have like a widely public life, she has someone who's intellectually her equal who can engage her in questions constantly and whenever she needs it, which is I think what she wanted with Casaubon, but she didn't get. So like I don't really have a problem with their marriage, and I think it ended up being what she wanted.
So maybe equal partnership in a kind of, at least in a personal sense, in their domestic sphere, in the private sense, even though, exactly as Abigail puts it, this is the way that the words that Eliot uses in the prologue, in the sense of the epic scope. So you have like, you have equal partnership in the marriage in the domestic private world of the novel, but not in the broad epic scale of the society. Sydney, what were you thinking?
That was kind of where I was going too. I think that's kind of the point of the novel, is that like she is restricted to the private sphere, and that's the only way she can really have happiness and power. And like, even when she had money, she didn't have enough money to make a sort of like splash in the world that she wanted as like a woman. So I think this was a good ending. Like, I don't hate it. I think that's kind of the point, that options for women are limited, and she did her best, and she, you know, made individual lives better.
Yeah, yeah. I like that point about the amount of money that she figures out that she has. You know, I put a lot of stress on. Let's see, page 812. The thing that she says to Will, like basically the first thing that she says to Will after they're like they kiss and like it's gonna work out. In an instant, Will was close to her and had his arms round her, but she drew her head back and held his gently away that she might go on speaking, her large tear-filled eyes looking at his very simply, while she said in a sobbing, childlike way, "We could live quite well on my own fortune. It's too much, 700 a year. I want so little, no new clothes, and I will learn what everything costs." That's a big deal, right? Because the cost of things, like literally what your money can buy and what it can't buy, like that's the men's world in this culture, in this society. Like that's part of the restricted social environment that Eliot's talking about, that like this genius was thrown down into. And sure, she has a certain capacity, she has a certain amount of agency to struggle against that and to try to change it. But what she doesn't have is the kind of money that it would take to do a huge thing. Like she has this, she wants to be Robert Owen, basically. Like if you studied that 19th century utopian figure in high school or in another college class, Robert Owen, who founded these like utopian industrial villages where he would build like workers' cottages and a factory and stores and try to create a kind of equitable social and economic environment on a small scale. She doesn't have enough money to do that. She can't build factories and build houses and like create like a miniature utopian society. But she doesn't understand this because she's been protected from it. She's been educated just to do private sphere things. Like she's been educated to have lapdogs and wear jewelry and, you know, and she is making a significant step away from that conventionally feminine domestic world. Ian, hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Good to see you. I got the message that you were trying to get on. Good to see you.
Yeah,
So,
glad I could make it.
We're on page 812.
Gotcha.
So that is a significant step. I think of her like reaching out to that epic world, reaching for that that public life, the public impact. But you know, not getting there, not getting too far. Okay. Oh yeah, last paragraph. Let's go to the last paragraph on 838. Certainly, those determining acts of her life were not ideally beautiful. They were the mixed result of a young and noble impulse struggling amidst the conditions of an imperfect social state, in which great feelings will often take the aspect of error, and great faith the aspect of illusion. So I think when she says the mixed results there, that picks up on something in the prologue. Do you remember what that was? The word mix comes up in the prologue. It's we talked about it. It comes across as maybe even like a chemical metaphor of like the mixture of different elements within a society, as in like the mixture of all the different influences that go into creating human perception and human personality. And so, like again, I think Abigail was picking up on this, the way that this is a kind of closing of the questions that were open at the beginning, which also like talks about the epic sphere of action. But here we are, like we're in an imperfect social state. And then like the next sentence, this is a really famous sentence. And actually this is a good sentence for you to kind of remember and sort of think back on as an important one in the book. For there is no creature whose inward being is so strong that it is not greatly determined by what lies outside it. Now that I really like, because that again is like, I mean, I don't know if it's like you want to say like it's against Feuerbach, or it's revising Feuerbach, or it's maybe pushing Feuerbach a little bit further. But that's different from saying we're just stuck inside our own heads. That's saying our own perceptions of ourselves inside our own heads are always shaped by this social landscape around us. I mean, someone last time was pointing out examples of other people, like the inner life of these characters is shaped by what they think other people are seeing when they see them. It's this kind of mirror effect. Everybody's imagining other people, and their imagination is mirrored back to them. And so that does open on to a kind of vision of a human community of social interconnection that's important. It's always like a shaping influence on who we are, what we value, what we imagine. Okay, I'll keep reading. You know, jump in whenever you feel like it. A new Teresa. So again, like, you know, if this were somebody with the capacity and the ability of a Saint Teresa, a new Teresa will hardly have the opportunity of reforming a conventual life, not conventional, notice the spelling, but conventual, as in the life of the convent, the female institutions in the Catholic Church. So she would hardly have the opportunity of reforming a conventual life any more than new Antigone will spend her heroic piety in daring all for the sake of her brother's burial. The medium in which their ardent deeds took shape is forever gone. So the medium, again, is like another sort of scientific world, but it's a scientific world to describe society. Like it's the social medium, the political and economic medium of attitudes, social structures, economic systems in which individual human action is always taking place and trying to, you know, plant itself and thrive. Emma?
Was Saint Teresa martyred? Because Antigone was killed she killed herself in order to prevent her death.
Right. I don't think Saint Teresa was martyred. Does anybody?
Okay.
If somebody wants to Wikipedia it, that's fine, since we're all online. As I recall, no, she had like a long and you know, very successful, like her, you know, a career where she made a lot of difference. But if that's incorrect, then somebody can.
It says she died of. Wait, what? Wait, this doesn't make any. Hold up. Let me keep looking at this.
Okay.
It says she died at the age of 24, but that's a lie. So.
Oh.
Like, right? Like, see, or am I thinking of the wrong? I don't know.
You're thinking of Mother Teresa.
Yes, I am. Okay, thank you. Okay, Saint Teresa died at the age of 24 from tuberculosis, is what it says.
Okay, there we go. So not martyred, but I was wrong. Not a long life. I was misremembering. But not a kind of tragic end like Antigone. Antigone is like a new. I mean, we had some sort of like some classical comparisons and analogies that were evoked with all that language about the epic. But Antigone is kind of a new analog, as I remember. At this point.
Well, I was just because I was thinking like if Saint Teresa was martyred and Antigone killed herself to prevent her own execution, then it could be like any woman who tries to do that and tries to go into the public sphere will end up with her own death.
Yeah. Yeah. But we insignificant people, with our daily words and acts, are preparing the lives of many Dorotheas, some of which may present a far sadder sacrifice than that of the Dorothea whose story we know. What do you think about? What do you think? I mean, does that provide any consolation to the disappointed here? I mean, you know, because I totally appreciate the. I mean, especially I do want to keep in mind Mary Elizabeth's comment that's like, what's with all the happy endings? Like this is so this is so way too perfect. This is crazy. And then other people saying like, feels like Dorothea kind of knuckled under to convention by getting into a more conventional marriage. But like what the narrator says is that what's going on here is that, you know, these characters, like all of us, are preparing the lives of many Dorotheas in the future. Eliza?
So I think this is in part like saying that, yeah, these are happy endings for these individuals, but they should be able to have the chance to create the happy endings that they actually wanted. And the only reason that these are happy endings for them, or, you know, one of the reasons, is that there was no way that they could possibly attain what they were aspiring after because of the way our social system is set up. And so she said, you know, these people are living a happy life, but we are continuing to perpetuate this, and we're going to prevent people, specifically women, from, you know, being able to reach above and beyond that. They are limited to this. This is the only happy ending that they can aspire to.
I thought I was on your side, and I was kind of making that point in that, but now I'm thinking like, what I flashed back to is the description of how everybody who knows Dorothea in Middlemarch, just like they still think she's crazy, like, oh, that insane person who like gave up all that money to marry this jerk, you know, like this nobody, and like, you know, she first married this, you know, dried up old man, and then she gave up the fortune after he died. I mean, and then married his cousin who was not a gentleman. It was all that anti-Semitic gossip about him, like being the son of a Jew, a Jewish pawnbroker, right? That just a little parentheses there, because that does come up a lot. Like that connection between, like, and we have no hint of any Jewish ancestry in Will's actual family. Do you know where, like, why would people make that assumption that there must be some Jewish background to the Ladislaw family, or to what's the other side of the family's name? I can't remember. The family who ran
Lindy or something, yeah.
Yeah.
No, well, he came from Poland, and Poland's by Russia, and Russia has Jews.
That's right. And so there's there's a Jewish population in Poland. What other association might have led people to assume that this is a Jewish family?
The pawnbroker stuff?
Yeah, exactly. That long tradition in Europe of like, it was a kind of bargain made during the long history of feudalism, where Christian theology at the time forbade the lending of money at interest. Yeah. To lend money at interest, you know, if you read Dante in Search, you may remember that, like, there's a special what do they call them? Like, there's a special level of hell that's set aside for money for usurers, which is the crime of not making anything yourself, but lending money to somebody else so they can make something, and then you sort of cream off the profit of all of their labor. And you've done nothing except you just hold the money and you collect the interest. It's quite fascinating, because nowadays we call that capitalism, of course, right? But, you know, in the Middle Ages, like 1,000 years ago, capitalism was essentially like a mortal sin. You would go to hell, and there was a special, like, a very painful region of hell set aside for you. But because that was the nature of the law, and because in these theological royalist kingdoms, money lending was illegal, Jewish communities in Europe were exempt, because they were not part of the Christian church. They were not believers. They were discriminated against and segregated in all kinds of ways. But because of this, banking and financial activity of many kinds was a way for Jewish communities to survive, a way for them to make money. And so they're drawing on, the characters are drawing on a traditional, often anti-Semitic association between lending money, banking, and Jewish communities. So it's a slur. It's an anti-Semitic slur, and that's the racist rationale behind it. But, like, back to Eliza's point, yeah, like, I'm when I read this thing the narrator says, like things are getting better and better. You know, like, don't be upset because Dorothea didn't, like, go off and found a university or write great feminist philosophy books or whatever. Like, don't be disappointed. She's preparing the way for future Dorotheas, just like all of us are. She's made the world a little bit better, and we're trying to do the same so that a future Dorothea wouldn't face the same kind of obstacles. But then I think, well, what did her I don't know. Everybody still thought she was just crazy. In other words, everybody still saw her just from within the distorted view of their own prejudiced and preconceived world. And they didn't even understand the good that she was able to do. I don't know, maybe I'm just off on a little tangent there.
I'm confused because I read that last sentence very differently.
Okay.
When she says, we insignificant people with our daily words and acts are preparing the lives of many Dorotheas, some of which may present a far sadder sacrifice than that of the Dorothea whose story we know. That sounds like she's saying that women are going to continue to have to sacrifice in the way that Dorothea has, and we are perpetuating that. So, but it sounded like you read it as things are getting better, and I don't know. I'm just confused.
I did, and you may be right. I mean, the emphasis may be on that last clause where the emphasis is really on asking us to evaluate our own role in maintaining these obstacles.
Yeah, because I think Dorothea gets a happy ending, but only in relative terms. That's my thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, this is the best outcome in this situation, but it's not the best of all outcomes. That's my opinion. So.
Yeah, no, that's good. I like that. And you may be able, that's a good reading. Let's keep going, and we'll do the last paragraph. Her finely touched spirit had still its fine issues, though they were not widely visible. Her full nature, like that river of which Cyrus broke the strength, spent itself in channels, which had no great name on earth, but the effect of her being on those around her was incalculably diffusive. For the growing good of the world is partly dependent on unhistoric acts, and that things are not so ill with you and me as they might have been is half owing to the number who live faithfully a hidden life and rest in unvisited tombs. I love the two negative adjectives there, unhistoric acts and unvisited tombs. You know, like I'm trying to tell you the history of things that didn't happen. Right? Nobody celebrated these things. Nobody goes to her grave and says, ah, yes, the great genius Dorothea Brooke. And yet, this is a story worth telling. I like that a lot. I also really like, I do like this. It's great that Emma was, doing word searches in the book and saw how many times the word light is used. I mean, I think if anything, light is arguably the controlling metaphor of this book. It's the most frequent metaphor, and if you take that point of view, you say it all goes back to that candle passage. But here the metaphor is water, and time is a river, and that produces something very different. Where her own nature, like this big river, ended up getting diverted into these multiple little rivulets. It was diffused. Her influence on the world around her was incalculably diffusive. And it ends up being spread, her force ends up being spread into little streams that are almost too small to see. Maybe invisible to lots of people. But they were there, and they are contributing to something important and something valuable and something worth noticing. Emma?
I feel like water itself isn't that far off, because if you think of the whole metaphor as the mirror and the candle, then water is very much a mirror. So it doesn't, I don't know, I didn't notice water until she mentions Noah and Noah's Ark in the second chapter in book 2. And then after that, all the water metaphors start showing up. But I think it still goes with the candle and the mirror.
Okay, a couple other things before we go. Well, just a little more about Will and Dorothea. I mean, were you happy in that? I just read the last chapter, where Dorothea says, I will learn what everything costs. I said, yeah, were you happy with this? I saw some heads nodding.
I love it.
Yes. Shaliz.
It just seems to me like she's trying to start over in a way. Like, even all the money she dedicates to helping out with Floodgate, she was saying, like, I don't need this money. I have nothing to do with it. Like, it might as well go to you and you can have more benefit from it than I can. So I think anything that, well, you were saying, like, before, how in this society, like, buying stuff and I guess material investments are more of like a man's thing. So I also think there's irony in that she gives the money she has to a man to like restart himself. So it's like even the decision she does make with her money, a big portion of it goes to helping a man, and the other portion, I guess she's trying to figure out her own life.
Mm-hmm.
But does gender matter to her? I don't think it does. I think it's more of who can I help?
Yeah, yeah. This makes me think of Mary Elizabeth's comment about the happy endings. I think, let's see, what do I want to say about this? I mean, you know who hated the happy endings of Victorian novels is modernists, right? Like Virginia Woolf's generation, Hemingway, Faulkner, that generation, Fitzgerald, right? It makes sense that in the 20th century, everybody ran in the opposite direction from this kind of conventional plot narrative, especially the marriage plot. So happy endings that are conceived as, you know, endings that would tie up with a happy heterosexual coupling. And really, in a way, like modernism, it did so much to shape our aesthetic. I mean, like yours and mine, like those of us living in the late 20th and early 21st century, our sense of what counts as like serious storytelling, even like contemporary categories like quality TV, like what counts as like, you know, really serious drama on TV as opposed to like cheesy, lowbrow, you know, popcorn entertainment. A lot of that sense of elite taste was shaped by modernism. And modernism really did its best to teach its readers that you don't like happy endings, like to tie everything up in a neat bow. That's unrealistic. It's oversimplifying. It's bad. It's, you know, and I love modernism. Like they have a point. I mean, a lot of it is. You know who's especially sharp about this is like James Joyce. James Joyce just like, you can just feel like the vomit rising in his gorge as he writes about how much he hates these, you know, these kinds of, because he's Irish and he was working class and he was Catholic, and it's like he just hates this whole Britishy thing. And so it's great, and I totally appreciate it. But there's part of me too that like the part of me that can quote the Shakespeare lines from the great romantic comedies. That's like, look, comedy has its own logic, and comedies, it's not just 19th century novels that end with happy marriages where like they tie up the whole plot with a neat bow. Like those formulaic comedies, that's an ancient genre. It's like literally a Greek and Roman genre, and then it's revived and sort of flowers in the Renaissance, and it's running through these books too, and it's running through modernism and postmodernism in our own era. Like the romantic comedy is still like a huge genre, which I love, by the way. So like. And I don't buy into like that still elite aesthetic that says like The Sopranos is serious TV, like Game of Thrones is serious TV. I don't know, maybe that's not a good example, but The Sopranos, like that was the big example of like when TV sort of got more serious and more literary and more socially engaged. So The Sopranos is serious TV, but like Will and Grace is not, or I don't know, maybe that's not a good example, but like the teen comedies, the teen romantic comedies that are just like an ever-present element of our literary landscape, like To All the Boys I've Loved Before, you know, like that's not serious art, that's not serious literature. And that doesn't really make sense. I mean, it's different, it's doing different things. But I think Eliot, especially like, is a great example of a really philosophically serious writer, like somebody who has very deep intellectual ambitions and who, you know, maybe to a degree is working with the plot conventions of the readers that she's trying to reach. And so she's like, okay, well, I'm going to tie up all these love stories with a nice neat bow at the end. And we can all feel good when, you know, the storm, I just love the cheesy convention of, you know, the storm is gathering and they rush inside and the lightning flashes and, you know, we know what that means, right? Like, and then they kiss. So, but I'm a total sucker for it. And you don't have to be like, I get the side that's skeptical and like, and nauseated. But anyway, that's what you were making me think of. Any other thoughts? Yeah, go ahead, Emma.
Okay, I had a question. This is like one of their, like when they kiss, I don't know if I've ever read a Victorian novel that describes a kiss in more than a sentence. What was the point of her devoting an entire, it's a short paragraph, but a whole paragraph to that, where she just like counteracting the standard of her day?
Do you want his lips trembled or her lips trembled and so did his, that paragraph?
And then, yeah. And
I mean,
then, like,
it ain't a long paragraph.
I know, but most times it's just like, and like Rochester kissed me or something. Like normally it's just that, or it's not even mentioned at all.
Well, I'll mention another great Victorian novel that I love. It was a couple of decades before this, but it's a book called North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell. Absolutely delightful book, and also I may have mentioned it in class. There's a great BBC adaptation, which I think you can get on Netflix. Wonderful book. And it ends with a kind of parallel scene where like it ends with a romantic union after a lot of strife between these two protagonists. And also, interestingly, with a kind of financial agreement between them where the woman ends up having money. And so there's some discussion about the economics of this marriage. It's very interesting. But that whole kiss, there's a kiss that's totally unspoken. It's all implied. And I have so much fun teaching it when I teach, especially like I teach sophomores and we read that. And we're like, okay, what happened? Like, and then it takes them 5 minutes to like, oh, are they kissing? Yeah, like, yes, they're kissing. So yeah, no, you have a point here. I just think like it's been 800 pages building up to this. Like she has to give us more than a sentence. She has to give us a thunderstorm. Like there has to be climatic, like in manifestation, like the forces of the universe are gathering and, you know, electricity is beginning to vibrate in the air. And finally these two, you know, people who've longed for each other and, you know, continually told each other that it's wrong. No, it's wrong. I can't, you know, this is bad. And no, I think it has to be a deeper thing because it's so much has led up to it. Okay, well, with the last section that I was going to take us to, but that I don't know, I ended up procrastinating and not, but I do think you know, as always, like you led us to all the hot spots of this last book. So that great job. We haven't looked directly at the chapter where it's after the one that someone talked about, where Dorothea kind of stays up all night and then finally resolves that she's going to go see Rosie and do whatever she can to clear this up. And that's the other great example of real human connection, where somebody really makes a sacrifice. It sort of is set up by the Fairbrother conversation with Fred, right? Where Fairbrother is sort of sacrificing himself. He's seeing things from Fred's point of view. Dorothea thinks, you know, like, nothing's going to happen for me. Like, my life is sort of over, but I'm going to do what I can to help Rosamond and Lydgate. And it's, you know, it's very touching. And then what she gets from that is, like, first of all, Rosie, for the first time, is able to break through that shell that prevents her from seeing anybody else in the world. And Emma mentioned this, the word shattered is used a couple of times to describe that, and it's appropriate. I mean, it really is like, you know, the mirror breaks, the spell is broken, and Rosamond can see the world, at least for a tiny glimpse of a moment. And then what Dorothea gets from that is the knowledge from Rosamond, the equally shattering knowledge that Will really does love her. And then that sets up the finale. So it's a nice sequence of things, which again, like, connects to the book's. I don't know. I feel it's quite debatable whether the book is revising or moving beyond the Feuerbach. I think you can take it both ways, but certainly we do get these images of connection. Okay, Excellent work. Congratulations again. I will be here at 3:30 for office hours if anybody needs me. Email if you want advice about articles. Otherwise, I will look for your article assessment at noon by noon on Tuesday, and then we will convene here at 2 p.m. Okay? Bye, everybody. I'll see you I'll be back on at 3:30.